What would you do if your own brother stood in front of a room full of people and erased your entire legacy with one sentence? He said it like he was announcing a lunch special, casual, confident, and completely devastating. From now on, this place is mine. And frankly, this business needs real leadership, not emotional women trying to play boss. Mason's voice sliced through the morning staff meeting like a knife through a ripe tomato. He puffed out his chest, eyes gleaming with smug satisfaction. That was his big moment, his first speech as the new owner of McKay's Southern Kitchen. I sat there silent, rage boiling beneath my calm expression. My name is Sabrina McKay. I'm 36 years old, and until that moment, I thought I understood betrayal. I was wrong. Because this wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. It was 12 years of blood, sweat, and quiet sacrifice dismissed in a single breath. Every recipe I'd perfected, every supplier I'd negotiated with, every late-night inventory session, every double shift, every single plate of honey butter cornbread that brought tourists from 3 states away. Gone. In his eyes, I was just an emotional woman trying to play boss. Jennifer, our head server, avoided my gaze. Carlos, our line cook, looked like he wanted to disappear. Even Sweet Bethany from pastry couldn't meet my eyes. They all knew the truth, knew who had built this place into what it was, and yet no one said a word. Any questions Mason asked, his voice oily with false confidence. The silence in that room was deafening. I stood, slowly, deliberately. My chair scraped against the floor like a final goodbye. "Congratulations on your promotion," I said evenly, staring straight into his smug little grin. No sarcasm, no emotion, just cold professional dismissal, exactly the kind he'd given me. For the first time, his smile cracked. I walked out. Through the kitchen I had once ruled, past the scent of cornbread and collard greens that used to feel like home. I grabbed my purse from the office, my former office, and stepped out into the thick Charleston heat. And as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, a single terrifyingly calm thought settled into my chest. He thinks he won. He thinks he put me in my place. But what Mason doesn't know is that he just made the biggest mistake of his life. I opened my phone, scrolled down to the contact I'd been avoiding for weeks. "Hello, Mr. Patterson. This is Sabrina McKay. I'm ready to sign that lease." Growing up, a McKay meant learning where you stood and never questioning it. My father, Thomas McKay, built our restaurant from nothing. Back in 1987, he transformed a tired roadside diner into Charleston's beloved McKay's Southern Kitchen. My mother, Patricia, ran the front of house with a grace that turned strangers into regulars. Together, they built a legacy, but there were always rules, unspoken ones. Mason, 3 years older and the only son, was always the heir. At dinner, he got the biggest cut of steak. At church, he was introduced as the future of the family. Me, I was just Sabrina, the daughter who helped out. Helping out eventually became everything. While Mason hopped between jobs and half-baked ventures, I went to college, then came back and gave myself to the restaurant. Not officially, no title, no paycheck that matched the hours. But when things broke, I fixed them. When orders went wrong, I smoothed it over. When vendors needed negotiating or new dishes had to be tested, I did the work. I was the backbone. Quietly, without applause, I created our bourbon peach cobbler that food bloggers drove from Atlanta to taste. I digitized our inventory system, negotiated lower food costs, and kept the books in the black even during lean years. I worked 60-hour weeks while Mason breezed in on Friday nights to flirt with investors. Sabrina's the detail person, Mom would say fondly, but Mason has vision. Vision. My spreadsheets were the reason we made payroll. My details boosted revenue 30% over 3 years. Still, 2 months ago, when Dad called a family meeting, I hoped just for a second that maybe they'd finally see me. They didn't. Dad stood up and handed Mason a leather-bound folder. "It's time," he said. "Mason will take over ownership starting this fall." I blinked. Mason blinked, then nodded, real serious, like he'd been preparing for this moment his whole life, instead of popping in once a week like a guest star in someone else's sitcom. You'll be invaluable support for him, Dad added. Every good leader needs a strong right hand. A right hand. I smiled. I nodded. And that night, I made a different kind of phone call. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to build. The morning of Mason's official takeover, I arrived at the restaurant 2 hours early out of habit more than anything. Vendor invoices, food prep, supply checks. Everything ran like clockwork in my head. Jennifer arrived first. Big day, she said, trying to sound upbeat. But I saw the worry in her eyes. Carlos came in next, then Bethany. Same vibe, tense silence, careful glances. And at 9:00 a.m., Sharp Mason strutted through the front door in his shiny new button-down and fake leather shoes. Behind him, our parents beamed like royalty, watching their golden boy claim the throne. Everyone to the dining room, Mason announced. We gathered around the same table where we'd planned holidays, solved staffing crises, and shared late-night laughs. Dad handed Mason the keys. Mom cried. Mason gave his first speech, and then he said it. This place needs real leadership, not emotional women trying to play boss. I didn't flinch. I stood. I smiled. I congratulated him, and I walked out of McKay's Southern Kitchen. Forever. But I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I was walking towards something bigger. The drive downtown felt like crossing into another life. 15 minutes later, I was pulling into the lot at Patterson Properties, the same real estate office where 3 weeks earlier I'd stood outside an empty King Street storefront, heartbroken, curious, and not ready. But now I was ready. Still interested, Mr. Patterson asked when he picked up. More than ever. Within the hour, I was standing in the vacant space. Brick walls, giant windows, a half-finished kitchen. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. What kind of timeline are you thinking, he asked, clipboard in hand. 2 months. Maybe less. He raised a brow. Ambitious. Think you can pull it off? I smiled. I've been running a restaurant for 12 years. Quietly. Efficiently. I know what it takes. The lease was higher than I'd hoped, but I could make it work. I'd wear every hat, chef, manager, marketer until revenue supported a team. As I signed the lease, something inside me clicked into place. I wasn't scared anymore. I was free. Back home that night, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine. The humid Charleston air clung to my skin, but for once, it felt good. It felt like possibility. My phone buzzed. A message from Jennifer. Are you okay? Mason's asking where you went. I stared at the screen, then typed back, I'm fine. Take care of yourself. The next morning, I was in go mode. Business license application, insurance contractor, estimates for the kitchen, health permit, timelines. I called every vendor I'd worked with at McKay's, explained that I was starting something new, and asked about opening accounts. Tony from Coastal Produce chuckled. Sabrina, you've been running that place for years. About time you had your own. Each call reminded me I wasn't alone. I had relationships, respect, quiet power I hadn't fully realized. By sunset, I had 3 contractor quotes, a nearly complete business license, and a spreadsheet of equipment I needed. My bank account didn't love me, but my soul. She was finally breathing again. The second week after I walked out, the cracks in Mason's leadership started showing. Bethany called me mid-morning, whispering like she was calling from a crime scene. I hope it's okay, I reached out. But things are bad here. What happened? He switched our suppliers. The cornbread is falling apart, the new cornmeal's gritty. Customers are complaining, Sabrina. The greens aren't right either, cheap ham hocks with no fat. I closed my eyes. That cornbread recipe was from my grandmother. I'd tested it for weeks, perfected it with specific mill-blended cornmeal from just outside Columbia. What did Mason say? He told me to stop whining and make it work. Jennifer tried to speak up too, but he said customers always complain and that we shouldn't cater to sensitive people. My stomach churned. Those sensitive people were loyal patrons. Some had been eating at McKay's for 20 years. I'm sorry, I said, but Mason's in charge now. That's the thing. She hesitated. He doesn't want to learn. He hired a marketing guy who wants quinoa salads on the menu. Quinoa salads at a Southern comfort food restaurant. I swallowed a laugh that came out bitter. Bethany. Are you still happy there, long pause? Then softly, I love the regulars. I love cooking. But I can't take pride in what we're serving anymore. I get it, I said. And if you ever want to talk about other opportunities, I do. And just like that, the first light flickered inside the future of my own team. That one call from Bethany was like a spark to dry kindling. And suddenly, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Carlos called next, then Jennifer, each of them careful, cautious, but curious. What are you planning, Sabrina? How soon will you open? Do you need help? I didn't recruit. I didn't pressure. I simply told them the truth. I'm building something new, something rooted in quality and respect. If you ever want in, you'll always have a place. And one by one, they began to align with me, not out of loyalty to the McKay name, but out of belief in what I represented. Leadership. Real leadership. 3 weeks in, I got a phone call that made me freeze mid-step. Unknown number, Charleston area code, Miss McKay. This is Dr. Patricia Ricks with the Charleston Food Network Association. I blinked. That name carried weight. CFNA was the gatekeeper of Charleston's culinary reputation. Prestigious, exclusive. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, I said, heart racing. I've heard you're opening a new restaurant. There's been some buzz. I've also heard that for the last decade, the best dishes at McKay's Southern Kitchen came from you. I couldn't speak. The reason I'm calling our autumn showcase is 8 weeks out. Normally, we feature established restaurants, but we occasionally spotlight newcomers with exceptional promise. Would you be interested? Was this real, Dr. Ricks? We haven't even had a soft launch. When do you plan to open? I mentally mapped the calendar. Kitchen installs next week. 2 weeks of testing. Staff training. 5 weeks from today, I said slowly. Perfect. That gives you 3 weeks of service before the showcase. I could barely breathe. She continued, the community is watching Sabrina, and many believe it's time Charleston's food scene finally recognized the woman behind the curtain. When we hung up, I stood in the center of my unfinished dining room, my hands trembling. They saw me. The industry saw me, not as the helpful sister or emotional woman, but as a chef, a leader, a force. That night, I pulled out my old family recipe book, its leather cover worn thin from years of use. As I flipped through the familiar pages, something fluttered loose, a yellowed envelope, my name on the front, inside a handwritten letter from my grandmother. Sabrina. They won't always see you, but food tells the truth. Don't stop feeding people with your heart. You're meant for more than someone else's shadow. My throat tightened. In that moment, I knew I wasn't just opening a restaurant, I was reclaiming a legacy. The next morning, I called my contractor. Jerry, can we move up the timeline by 1 week possible? But it'll cost overtime. Do it. I just got into the autumn showcase. He whistled low. That's big time, Sabrina. I know, I whispered. So let's build something worth showing the world. Opening day felt like standing on the edge of a cliff with no rope, no safety net, and nothing but belief. I named it McKay's Table, not to ride the family coattails, but to redefine them. This wasn't Mason's version of legacy. This was mine. A table where everyone belonged, where tradition met innovation, and where every bite told a story of grit and grace. No fanfare, no paid ads, just whispers. And yet, by 11:00 a.m. on our opening Thursday, the line was already forming. Jennifer, Carlos, and Bethany had all timed their notice at McKay's Southern Kitchen perfectly. They walked away from the mess Mason had made and walked towards something better, something honest. Our first customer, Mrs. Eleanor Davidson, 82 years old, purse in hand, eyes full of fire. I heard you were cooking again, she said, sliding into her chair like royalty. I missed your cornbread, baby. That new boy at your daddy's place doesn't know a thing about soul. I served her our signature pan-fried chicken with bourbon glazed collards, slow-cooked with real ham hock, and that cornbread golden soft kissed with herb butter and honey. She took one bite and her face lit up. This is it, she whispered. This is what I've been missing. By Friday, we had a wait list. By Tuesday, Mrs. Davidson had brought 3 friends. People came in quietly curious, then left wide-eyed speechless. Jennifer leaned over during the Friday rush. They're saying the food at the old place tastes hollow now. I nodded. I didn't gloat. I didn't trash Mason. That wasn't my style. I just kept cooking. With the autumn showcase just 3 weeks away, I pushed harder than I ever had. We practiced every plate to perfection. Carlos drilled our chicken until he could fry blindfolded. Bethany's bourbon peach cobbler looked like something out of a food magazine. Jennifer coached our servers like a general leading her troops into culinary battle. We were ready, but my nerves weren't. The morning of the event, I stared at my reflection in the prep room mirror. No makeup, apron slightly stained, heart pounding like a bass drum. And yet, I had never felt more powerful. This was my moment, my voice, my story served hot on porcelain. The showcase was held at Charleston's historic Market Hall. 24 restaurants, dozens of critics, and hundreds of guests. We were the smallest booth, the newest name. But the line at our table never died. One by one, the food world tasted who I really was. Pan-fried chicken with honey bourbon glaze, my grandmother's cornbread, Bethany's cobbler with fresh South Carolina peaches. Every dish whispered, "This is the woman you overlooked." Dr. Ricks found me near the end sipping sweet tea, watching the crowd. "Miss McKay," she said, smiling, "you've generated more praise tonight than any newcomer in this event's history." I blinked. Seriously. She leaned in. The food speaks. But so does the story. A woman forced out of her own family legacy who rose quietly and built something better. People are rooting for you. I didn't know whether to cry or cook more. The next morning, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Mason's name lit up the screen. After everything, after his smirk, his insult, his erasure, he finally wanted to talk. I didn't. I sat on my porch with a cup of strong coffee and the Post and Courier spread out across my lap. Front page of the food section. McKay's table brings soul back to Southern cuisine. The subtitle, a fresh voice rooted in tradition, Sabrina McKay reclaims Charleston's palate. My hands shook, not from nerves, this time it was relief, validation, proof that quiet strength leaves a louder mark than arrogance ever could. That evening, I got another call, this time from a reporter at the Southern Living Quarterly. "We're doing a feature on women redefining Southern cuisine. Your name came up a lot." They called me the matriarch of modern Southern cooking. It made me laugh out loud. A belly-deep, cathartic laugh I hadn't felt in months. Mason had once said I was too emotional to lead, and now I was being called a matriarch, a leader, a force shaping the future. I framed that article and hung it near the hostess stand just below my grandmother's handwritten cornbread recipe. A week later, Mrs. Davidson returned. Same chair, same order. "I just wanted to say," she said, voice a little softer, "what you've done here, it matters. Not just the food, the way you did it. You walked away with your head high. That takes grit." I didn't have words. Just a smile and a fresh glass of sweet tea. The months that followed were a blur of fully booked weekends, glowing reviews, and deep, steady pride. I wasn't chasing legacy anymore. I was the legacy. And Mason Well word on the street was McKay's Southern Kitchen had gone through 3 pastry chefs and a branding overhaul that flopped on Instagram. Food bloggers said it felt soulless. Tourists left unimpressed. Some say Dad tried to help. Others say Mason refused advice. I didn't care. Because the truth was, I wasn't competing anymore. I had already won. So here's what I'll leave you with. They can call you emotional. They can overlook your work. They can hand the keys to someone less deserving. But what they can't do is erase your brilliance. Because when you build something with heart, with vision, with truth, it lasts. And when the world finally sees you, they never forget. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who was supposed to believe in you? Share your story in the comments. And if this one hit home, don't forget to like, subscribe, and pull up a seat at the next table. There's always room for one more.